Before the dawn of Chinese civilization broke, the Central Plains were still fields covered in mist where small tribes survived through farming, hunting, and rituals honoring heaven and earth. During that era, from the lands along the Yellow River, a man rose, Tang Wen, also known as Cheng Tang, the one whom legend calls the man chosen by heaven to replace Xia. He was the chieftain of the Shang tribe, born into a lineage that revered its ancestors and believed deeply in omens from the heavens. Under the Xia dynasty, the Shang were only vassals, yet over many generations they accumulated strength, mastering metal, horses, and an army of skilled warriors. Cheng Tang was renowned for his kindness and humility, for listening to his ministers, a sharp contrast to Xia Jie, the last ruler of the Xia, remembered as cruel, indulgent, and deaf to heaven's mandate. To his contemporaries, the Xia had rotted from within. Tang was simply the instrument through which heaven fulfilled its will, to change the fate of the realm. The winds of destiny began to turn with the Battle of Muye, a confrontation regarded as the dawn of the Shang Age, occurring around 1600 BCE. According to records, Xia Jie, relying on his vast army, marched to block Tang at the Mingtiao Plain, now within Shandong or Henan. Tang, though commanding only a few thousand men, had the loyalty of his people and the support of nearby tribes. Before the battle, he declared, "Heaven condemns the unjust, man punishes the cruel." The soldiers of Shang bore in their hearts a sacred conviction that they fought in heaven's name. A great storm arose. Chroniclers took it as a sign that heaven favored Tang. When the two armies clashed, Xia Jie's ranks fell into chaos, and many of his vassals turned their spears against him. The battle ended in dust and triumphant cries. The Xia dynasty collapsed, and Tang ascended the throne, founding the Shang Dynasty, the first Chinese dynasty supported by clear archaeological evidence. After victory, Cheng Tang did not indulge in luxury. He immediately moved to consolidate his power. He established his capital at Bo, a center of trade and worship along the Yellow River. From there, Shang reorganized its administration, distributing lands to relatives, building centers of worship, and creating a standing army. The new government stood on two pillars: politico-military authority and divine theocracy. Cheng Tang laid the foundation for the idea that the king was the son of heaven, both ruler of men and messenger of divine will. The military was tightly structured. Tribes that submitted were allowed to keep their lands but required to pay tribute: copper, horses, and soldiers. It was a strategic policy, expansion without endless conflict. The power of Shang lay not only in weapons but also in discipline and loyalty. Meanwhile, beneath the soil of the Yellow River, a new technological civilization was taking form. The Shang mastered bronze casting, a technology far ahead of neighboring tribes. In the forges, molten bronze alloyed with tin and lead was poured into fine clay molds to produce weapons, ceremonial bells, battle axes, and ritual vessels adorned with intricate motifs. Each bronze object was not merely a tool, but a symbol of authority. Alongside this, oracle bone script, inscriptions carved on turtle shells and ox bones, emerged, recording prayers, commands, and omens of the king. These marks became the earliest ancestor of Chinese characters. From metallurgy to writing, the Shang inaugurated an era where humankind inscribed its will upon metal and bone, rendering history tangible. But Shang was not merely a dynasty of warriors and smiths. In the ancient mind, every victory and every harvest was tied to sacrifice and prophecy. Cheng Tang revered ritual above all. Ceremonies held amid the beating of bronze drums, the swirl of incense, and the echo of sacred chants. The king, in a black sacrificial robe and jade tablet in hand, stood at the heart of the altar, the meeting place of gods and mortals. He was both high priest and war commander. Diviners etched questions onto turtle shells. If we march to war, will heaven approve? Then they heated the shell, read the cracks, and decided the fate of thousands. It was faith in heaven's mandate and communion with ancestors that forged the spiritual backbone uniting the Shang people in their early reign. Gradually, the dynasty took shape, with rammed earth walls, straight avenues, granaries, stables, bronze foundries, and temples. At dawn, patrols marched through the city, bronze armor gleaming, the sound of war drums intertwined with ceremonial bells, forming the unique rhythm of life in Bo, the first capital of Shang. It was a place where war and worship coexisted, where a prayer uttered at night could become a command to march by morning. Cheng Tang ruled for about 30 years, remembered as the wise founder of his line. After his death, the Shang people built a shrine in his honor, passing the throne to his descendants, beginning a long succession of kings. The shadow of Tang Wen became the archetype for all later monarchs, brave in battle, reverent to heaven, compassionate toward his people. The tribes once conquered now submitted not from fear, but from respect, for a dynasty that embodied order and sacred dignity. From this foundation, the Shang Dynasty entered its era of expansion, shaping the civilization of ancient China. The footprints of Cheng Tang remain deep in history. The man who, from a small tribe, forged the first kingdom of unified spiritual and political order, establishing the notion of the Son of Heaven, a concept that would dominate Chinese thought for more than 3,000 years. And amid the eternal echo of Mingqiao's drums, history began to tell the story of an empire born of blood, fire, and unshakable faith in heaven's destiny. After the smoke of victory at Mingqiao faded, the Shang Dynasty entered a new era, one of establishing order and consolidating power. If Cheng Tang was the pathfinder, then his successors were those who transformed a tribe into the first ancient Chinese state with a complete power structure. From the earthen huts of the capital Bo, the court took shape. The king stood at the center, surrounded by concentric circles of power, bound together by blood, divinity, and ritual. On the stone steps of the palace, the morning court began. The Shang King, the Son of Heaven, wore a bronze crown inlaid with jade and sat on a high throne. Below him were grand ministers, chancellors, high priests, and generals. The state apparatus gradually formed around the hereditary feudal principle. Royal relatives were granted lands at the borders, serving both as lords and as shields protecting the center. Those who distinguished themselves in battle were granted marquisates and baronies, forming a network of vassals under the king. This structure was sustained by ritual and loyalty, but also contained the seeds of division. When power is fragmented, unity of purpose is easily lost. Modern scholars, such as classical Chinese studies experts in Yishe and researchers from Cambridge, point out that blood ties and political relations during the Shang were so intertwined that the boundary between the court and the clan was nearly indistinguishable. Each king ruled as the head of a vast extended family, where kinship determined rank and authority. This created stability in the early phase, but in the long run became an obstacle to reform and to the inclusion of new blood in the power center. Within this structure, religion and ancestral ritual formed the foundation of authority. The Shang King was not merely a ruler, he was the supreme priest, the mediator between the human and the divine realms. Every major state decision, from military campaigns to taxation to ennoblement, had to be consulted with the spirits. The tool for this was oracle bone divination. Questions were carved on ox scapulae or turtle shells, heated, and the cracks interpreted for omens. The bones unearthed at Anyang record thousands of royal inquiries. Do the ancestors approve the relocation of the capital? Will it rain tomorrow? If we march north, will we be victorious? These inscriptions are living testimony to a dynasty at once superstitious and rational, believing that only with heaven's and the ancestors' consent could the king's actions be legitimate. Alongside religion was military might, the foundation of the Son of Heaven's throne. The Shang army was organized both centrally and locally. At the core was the royal force commanded by the king himself, including infantry, cavalry, and especially bronze chariots, a symbol of the age's strength. According to oracle bone texts and archaeological finds, each chariot was drawn by 2 horses and manned by a driver, an archer, and a spearman. This elite corps, mobile and powerful, was used to break enemy formations or pursue fleeing troops. Local armies were maintained by vassal lords who had to provide troops in wartime, a form of conscription. In the Bo garrisons, the beating of war drums, the clanging of forges, and the smoke from bronze furnaces filled the air with the fervor of a militarized dynasty. The Shang developed piece mold casting, a major advance over the lost wax methods of other civilizations. Thanks to this, Shang weapons were refined. Battle axes and bronze spears had sharp, thin edges capable of cutting through leather armor. Archaeologists have found hundreds of weapons buried with generals, proof of both status and pride in Shang military tradition. Yet military power was inseparable from the economy. The Shang economy rested on three pillars: agriculture, metallurgy, and tribute labor. Land was owned by the royal clan, commoners cultivated it under supervision and owed produce to the state. War captives became slaves, laboring in bronze workshops, farms, or fortress construction. Meanwhile, bronze casting and jade craftsmanship flourished, becoming symbols of authority. Only nobles could use bronze ritual vessels, while commoners used pottery. Social stratification became pronounced, but this specialization also gave rise to a primitive yet organized and centrally controlled economy. However, the stronger the Shang court grew, the more it faced internal turmoil. The issue of succession soon became an undercurrent of instability. Many modern studies, such as those from Cambridge University Press, note that the Shang experienced 9 generations of chaotic succession before establishing a linear principle, passing the throne only to the eldest son or a clearly designated heir. Before that, the crown had shifted among brothers, cousins, and uncles, causing years of contention. These intra-clan successions, though bloodless, eroded the dynasty's prestige. Princes, generals, and nobles all carried seeds of doubt. Who was truly heaven's chosen? In the flickering lamplight of the inner chambers, secret meetings and alliances formed quietly among factions. The king had to rely on diviners and omens to choose an heir, a form of politics steeped in destiny. Each crack on a turtle shell was not only a celestial sign, but a trace of human anxiety before the uncertainty of power. From Cheng Tang's reign to the mid-Shang period, the state became a 3-tiered power machine. At the top was the king-priest. In the middle, the hereditary aristocracy and the army. At the bottom, the laborers and slaves. Every activity, from war to ritual, from farming to literacy, served to reinforce the Son of Heaven's authority and his bond with the divine. Though seemingly solid, this system harbored rigidity and division within. These would later become the seeds of court intrigues and succession crises. To later generations, this phase of the Shang dynasty was the formative age of the Chinese state, when military, religious, political, and economic elements fused into the first unified order in Chinese history. Yet it was also when the serpent of power began to devour its own tail, when authority based on blood and divine mandate grew increasingly uncontrollable. And from those cracks, the seemingly invincible dynasty would soon face new undercurrents, where cunning, loyalty, and ambition would battle to define the destiny of the Shang Empire. That morning, the red sun shone through a thick layer of mist, casting light upon the walls of Yinshu. It was the new capital that Wu Ding, the 23rd king of the Shang dynasty, had recently expanded and fortified. In the dim glow, a tall man clad in bronze armor, engraved with Taoti patterns, stood in silence upon the palace steps. His gaze was cold yet bright, his hands calloused from wielding the sword, his deep voice resonant like the sound of bronze drums. Wu Ding was not only a monarch, but a born commander who brought the Shang dynasty to the peak of power and prestige during his reign of more than half a century. From the time he was crowned prince, he had witnessed the Shang court sink into chaos over succession, with divisions among the people. Upon ascending the throne, Wu Ding chose silence for 3 years, speaking to no one, holding no court, quietly observing his ministers to discern loyalty from deceit. After that time, he reappeared, summoned the vassal states, and declared the restoration of the mandate of heaven for the Shang. Ancient records and oracle bone inscriptions stated, "Heaven granted auspicious signs. The king listened to the people. The Shang army roared like thunder." Thus began the greatest era of revival for the dynasty. From the capital Yinshu, the administrative, religious, and military center, campaigns to expand the territory were continuously launched. Wu Ding led his armies or dispatched generals to conquer surrounding tribes such as Tufang, Qiang, Guifang, and Yifang, forces that had often rebelled or threatened the Shang borders. Each campaign was meticulously recorded on oracle bones, from the day of departure, sacrifices to the river gods, to the victorious outcome. According to archaeological and historical sources, thinkalong.net, the Shang army under Wu Ding could mobilize tens of thousands of men and hundreds of war chariots, an enormous force compared to contemporary tribes. These conquests were not only military in nature, but also reshaped the political map of the Yellow River Basin. Hostile tribes were subdued, forced to pay tribute, and integrated into a loyal vassal system, forming a protective ring around Yinshu. In distant lands, Wu Ding granted titles to local chiefs, gifting them bronzes and seals, a governance model that blended firmness and benevolence, authority and grace. As a result, the Shang Dynasty under his rule became a vast, stable political alliance whose influence extended beyond the Central Plains. Yet, amid the smoke of war, Shang history recorded an extraordinary woman, Fu Hao, Queen of Wu Ding. She was not only his consort, but also a brilliant general commanding tens of thousands of troops in battle. Oracle bone inscriptions and the archaeological findings from Fu Hao's tomb, discovered at Yinshu in 1976, reveal that she led major campaigns against the Tufang, Yifang, and Qiang tribes, all victorious. In one inscription, Wu Ding prayed to his ancestors, "If Fu Hao goes to battle, will the ancestors bless her?" A testament to his faith and respect for his warrior queen. Fu Hao's tomb remains one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries of ancient China. Over 700 burial artifacts of bronze, jade, and bone, along with 16 sacrificial prisoners, symbols of her exceptional status. Among them, massive battle axes and command seals inscribed with her name Fu Hao attest that she held real military authority. In a male-dominated era, Fu Hao proved that courage and intellect, not gender, determined one's place in history. Under Wu Ding, art and ritual also reached their zenith. Along the banks of the Yellow River, bronze foundries flourished. Gigantic ritual tripods, ceremonial vessels, bells, and axes adorned with divine beast motifs, were crafted with unmatched sophistication. These were not mere artworks, but sacred objects used in ancestral rites, symbolizing royal power and prosperity. Ceremonies were held frequently, after victories for rainmaking or to offer harvest tributes. The sound of drums, bronze gongs, and chants echoed through the temples. Ritual became the language of power, where king and gods communed. Beyond spiritual culture, the architecture of Wu Ding's royal city reflected the empire's grandeur. Excavations at Yinshu show that the city was organized along a central axis, with the palace at its heart, surrounded by temples and military quarters. Straight roads connected granaries, foundries, stables, noble residences, and commoner districts in rational layout. This structure demonstrated Wu Ding's exceptional organizational and administrative ability, a ruler who mastered both warfare and governance, expansion and stability. On the battlefield, Wu Ding was a master strategist. He was the first monarch recorded to employ coordinated tactics between chariots and infantry, elevating Shang warfare to a new level. According to records, ChinaKnowledge.de, each chariot unit was supported by a troop of about 100 infantrymen. The chariot as spearhead, infantry as shield formation. When battle commenced, war drums thundered, chariots charged like lightning, horses neighed, and bronze spears gleamed. From above, the king and officials watched through clouds of dust, a scene both majestic and terrifying. This organization granted the Shang army unmatched mobility and discipline, striking swiftly, finishing decisively, and retreating in order. In governance, Wu Ding enforced strict military discipline with clear rewards and punishments. Victorious soldiers received bronze weapons and precious jades. The defeated faced sacrificial death. He understood that victory stemmed not only from strength, but from faith. Faith in the king, in heaven, and in the oracle-marked destiny. That discipline and belief allowed him to sustain long campaigns without fracturing unity. When the smoke of war subsided, Wu Ding returned to Yinshu to hold grand rituals to heaven and earth. Dressed in silver-white ceremonial robes, he stood silently before the temple fires, watching the incense rise, his gaze not proud but heavy. He knew that each victory cost blood, and each subdued tribe was a new burden to bear. Yet such was the fate of one chosen by heaven, both conqueror and guardian of cosmic order. Under Wu Ding's reign, the Shang Dynasty reached the pinnacle of its might. With flourishing economy, vibrant culture, formidable army, and religion permeating all aspects of life. Chinese history, though transformed over millennia, remembers him as the wisest ruler of Shang, the one who turned a faith-based kingdom into a true empire. But every summit carries the shadow of dusk. As Wu Ding aged, the generals who had fought beside him passed away. the vassal states grew stronger, and divisions emerged within the court. Gazing across the plains of the Yellow River where horses still galloped as before, his deep eyes reflected the sign of an era shifting, from glory into years of intrigue, challenge, and decline. The sky above Yinshu that morning was dyed a deep crimson. Wind from the Yellow River swept up dust in waves, carrying with it the pounding rhythm of war drums echoing from the southern walls. Amid the roar of soldiers, Fu Hao emerged from the palace. Her hair was tied high, her bronze armor engraved with images of mythical beasts, her eyes gleaming like blades reflecting the fire of heaven. Before her stood thousands of war chariots aligned in perfect order, banners of Shang fluttering in the wind. On this day, she, the queen of King Wu Ding, was no longer merely a woman of the inner court, but the supreme commander of a grand campaign, bearing the mandate of heaven to crush the rebellious tribes threatening the western frontier, the Tufang, Yi, and Qiang. These tribes, once vassals of Shang, had taken advantage of internal distractions to form an alliance against the central kingdom. According to Wikipedia and Oracle bone inscriptions unearthed at Yinshu, Fu Hao was personally granted command of 13,000 troops and more than 200 chariots, an unprecedented force for the ancient world. The military decree was engraved upon a bronze tablet and placed before the ancestral altar. When the sacrificial ceremony concluded, she knelt, voice clear and resolute. "If heaven is with us, let the drums never cease." The march stretched through misty valleys. In the distance, the earthen mountains of Qiang rose dark and steep, sheltering the enemy's stronghold. The terrain was treacherous, forests dense, marshes deep, making chariot movement difficult. Fu Hao divided her army into 3 divisions, the central force under her direct command, and the left and right wings led by generals Zhou and Yi. Before the attack, she ordered the black banners of the Shang war god to be raised and proclaimed, "Those who advance shall be sheltered by heaven, those who retreat shall be struck down by heaven's wrath." When the drums thundered, the war chariots surged like rolling storms, horses screaming against the sky. Standing atop her chariot, Fu Hao held a long spear, her face calm amid the chaos of blades and arrows. The Qiang archers loosed volleys from the hillsides, but Shang armor, thick bronze plates polished bright, caught the sunlight like flashes of lightning. The infantry advanced behind, step by step, their war cries shaking the earth. The battle raged for an entire day, the ground beneath turned to red mud. As dusk fell, Fu Hao raised the red command flag, leading her central troops in a decisive charge at the enemy's heart. Wheels crushed stone, spears clashed in sparks, and the Qiang formation broke apart. That night, the Shang camp blazed with fire. Soldiers celebrated victory with millet wine and chants of thanksgiving to the gods. Amid the circle of light, Fu Hao sat in silence, her face streaked with blood and dust, yet her eyes still burned fiercely. A young soldier knelt before her, offering a broken battle axe, a trophy seized from the Qiang chieftain. She smiled faintly, set the axe upon the table, and whispered, "Heaven has favored us." The campaigns continued, one after another. She led expeditions against Tufang, a fierce southeastern tribe renowned for its warriors, and achieved resounding victory, compelling dozens of tribal chiefs to surrender and pay tribute. In the Oracle bone records, the name Fu Hao appears more than 200 times, more than any other general of her age, proof of her extraordinary stature and influence as a woman in a patriarchal world. The artifacts unearthed from Fu Hao's tomb, now preserved in Anyang, tell her story in the language of metal. Dozens of massive bronze battle axes, Yue, sharp enough to cleave a beast in half, jeweled helmets, daggers, bronze mirrors, and chariots were buried with her so she might command in the afterlife. Every weapon bore carvings of dragons, divine beasts, or the inscription Fu Hao, symbols of authority and honor. Archaeologists regard it as one of the largest bronze hoards of the Shang era, reflecting the dynasty's mastery of metallurgy, the artistry of war, and the reverence for heroism. Fu Hao's string of victories strengthened the prestige of Wu Ding's court and secured long-lasting peace for the western frontier. The Qiang and Tufang tribes later became allies, offering bronze, horses, and spoils to Shang. Oracle inscriptions recorded the king's divination. Because of Fu Hao, the realm is at peace. Not merely praise, but acknowledgement that the fate of the nation was intertwined with a woman's valor. When the triumphant army returned to Yinshu, a grand ceremony of honor was held in the Great Hall. The bronze drums thundered 3 long beats, incense smoke coiling through the air. Wu Ding himself presented her with a great ceremonial bronze axe, called the Sacred Yue, the supreme emblem of command. During the ceremony, the king did not sit upon his throne, but stood beside her, an act rarely seen in Shang history. The courtiers knelt. The soldiers shouted in unison, 10,000 victories to Fu Hao, a roar that rolled beyond the city walls, echoing through the night like thunder. Yet behind the radiance of triumph, the palace trembled with unease. Conservative ministers murmured, uneasy that military power rested in a woman's hands. In the shadowy corridors of the rear palace, whispers slithered, "If the queen commands the army, who commands her?" Wu Ding heard it all, yet remained silent. He knew that Fu Hao's victories had not only saved the dynasty, but created an unprecedented precedent, that a woman could stand equal to men in both governance and war. From that moment, the Shang court divided into 2 factions, those who worshipped her as divine, and those who feared her as a threat to order. In her later years, Fu Hao weakened after countless campaigns. When she passed away, Wu Ding decreed a state funeral, erecting her tomb by the Yellow River, entombing hundreds of weapons and treasures beside her. The king himself came to the site, bowed low, and spoke no word. The wind rose, the morning banners twisted in the air, and in the fading light, it seemed the figure of the warrior queen still stood across the plain, bronze armor aglow, battle axe raised toward the horizon. Modern historians call that age the era of 2 wings, one of Wu Ding, one of Fu Hao. Together they carried Shang to its zenith, blending the king's wisdom with the queen's courage. Fu Hao's campaigns were not merely military triumphs, but a declaration of human worth in the flow of history, where loyalty, talent, and destiny transcended all limits. And upon each oracle bone uncovered centuries later, the ancient words still whisper, Fu Hao marched, heaven granted victory. As though history itself, even after 3 millennia, still wishes to remind humankind, the fire of courage and faith can illuminate an empire. After the glorious years under King Wu Ding, the golden light of the Shang Dynasty began to fade. Yinshu, the capital that once shone with the sound of bronze drums and the fragrance of sacrificial incense, was now shrouded in the darkness of court intrigues and schemes. Behind the thick earthen walls, where the flicker of oil lamps cast wavering shadows on the reliefs of divine beasts, princes, princesses, ministers, and officials began turning against one another. After Lady Fu Hao's death, the old king grew frail, central power wavered, and the Shang court entered the age when the pen and the dagger shared one sheath, a time of hidden politics and invisible assassins. According to the Cambridge History of Ancient China, after the reign of Wu Ding, succession became a perilous game. The Shang had a complex tradition of inheritance. The throne could pass to a son, but also to a brother, nephew, or distant relative, as long as that person was chosen by heaven. Thus, whenever the king fell ill or a great sacrificial ceremony drew near, the court trembled with factional strife. The crown prince held hereditary right, but a younger prince might command troops. An elder minister possessed public prestige, while diviners controlled the will of heaven through the cracks of oracle bones. Everyone had a reason to believe he deserved the throne. In the dim corridors of the Beau Palace, whispers slipped through heavy silk curtains. A queen plotted to ally with generals to secure the crown for her son. A prince bribed diviners with gold and silver so that heaven's decree might favor him. A loyal minister was falsely accused of treason and vanished into the night. The Shang throne, once founded on faith and divine mandate, had become the prize of ambition and blood. The oracle bones of this period, inscribed relics preserved at Yinshu, reflect an atmosphere of anxiety and suspicion within the court. Many fragments record questions such as, if Minister Z is disloyal, will heaven bring calamity? If Prince K harbors rebellion, which god should be sacrificed to in order to quell it? According to analyses from spicefsi.stanford.edu, the use of oracle bones had evolved beyond forecasting weather or fortune. It became a political weapon, a form of loyalty test and justification for suppression. When the king doubted someone, he ordered a divination. If the crack was ill-omened, the accused was executed. Heaven became witness to political verdicts. The divine power that once safeguarded the dynasty was now turned into an invisible blade of death. Inside the inner court, morning audiences no longer discussed state affairs, but played out as cold battles of wit. Every word had to be weighed as if stepping on thin ice. A courtier favored today could be executed for treason tomorrow. Newly crowned kings feared assassination, sleeping in a different chamber each night, constructing diagonal corridors and hidden doors, and posting archers in the shadows. In the dim glow of oil lamps, glances of distrust crossed like drawn swords. The harem was no less turbulent. After Fu Hao's death, women's status declined, but queens and princesses still served as political cards. Some used marriage to manipulate factions. Others exploited religion, joining rituals to win public devotion. Ancient records mention a princess who persuaded her father to execute 3 generals to prevent rebellion, only to be betrayed later by her own allies. The Shang Palace had become a battlefield without blades, where victory belonged to those who knew when to remain silent and when to strike unseen. These intrigues soon rippled outward to the battlefield. As the court lost credibility, frontier generals hesitated to send troops. Once loyal forces splintered into central, local, and royal factions. The army's strength dwindled, morale decayed. Once mighty chariots and veteran infantry regiments became mere shadows of their former selves. In Yinshu's granaries, grain rotted. In temples, sacrifices were reduced as the treasury ran dry. The mighty engine of Shang power was rusting from within. Minor civil wars broke out among vassal states. Some refused tribute, others rebelled, declaring themselves kings. The new ruler had to dispatch troops to quell his own subjects. The once unified realm fractured into overlapping spheres of power. Each vassal became a small kingdom, afraid of and hostile to the others. Meanwhile, the central court, consumed by rituals and power struggles, had lost its grip. Modern scholars describe this as a structural crisis, where the same fusion of bloodline, religion, and authority that once empowered Shang now became its fetters. When all legitimacy rested on lineage and divine signs, no one dared to reform, no one dared to question. The last Shang kings are depicted as anxious and cruel, praying to their ancestors by day, executing ministers by night. Beyond the walls of Yinshu, dark clouds gathered in the western sky, where the Zhou tribe was rising. Rumors spread among the vassals about a new army and a reformist movement. Yet within the Shang court, no one cared. They were still quarreling, blaming, divining. Amid the rhythmic beat of ritual drums, one could no longer tell the difference between prayers and the dying cries of an empire. Like a sword sharpened too long, the Shang Dynasty had become so keen it cut its own hand. Intrigues, corrupted rituals, and pervasive fear drained the spirit of the nation. All the ingredients of collapse were now in place: a weakened army, an exhausted economy, a divided people, and a paranoid court. The story of Shang did not end with a single defeat. It began to crumble from the invisible cracks within its own soul. Before the empire was overthrown by the Zhou at Muye, it had already destroyed itself inside its palace, with the blade of doubt and the curse of the very faith it once worshipped. And in the incense smoke of late-night sacrifices, they say that one night a strange crack appeared on an oracle bone, a line running long and straight, splitting the shell in two. The diviner fell silent, then said, "Heaven has fractured. Shang is no longer one." It was the final omen, the herald of the storm called Zhou, rising on the western horizon. Across the vast fields along the Yellow River, the war drums of the Shang Dynasty thundered like storms. That sound once struck fear into countless tribes, for behind it lay the first powerful and organized military machine in Chinese history. No longer a collection of fragmented warriors like in the Xia era, the Shang army was a system forged to the bone, where every soldier was a cog in the war engine serving the Son of Heaven. According to ChinaKnowledge.de, the Shang army was divided into units based on a decimal and multiple system, similar to the maniple formations later used by the Romans. 10 soldiers formed a cell, 10 cells made a squad, 10 squads a division, and several divisions joined to form a great army. Each level had its own commander, bound by oaths and blood sacrifices to answer to the one above. This tight hierarchy allowed the Shang to control tens of thousands of soldiers while maintaining iron discipline. The king was the supreme commander, But in battle, authority could be given to generals or royal kinsmen, usually those deemed chosen by the gods through oracle bone divination. Before each campaign, the army gathered at the central sacrificial hall, where the priest read the prayers, the sacred fire rose, and the king proclaimed, "Heaven's mandate has descended. The Shang army marches." Formation and strategy, the art of order and speed. If war in the Shang era had a soul, it resided in their mastery of formation. The Shang were renowned for their coordination of chariots and infantry, a tactic centuries ahead of its time. The chariots, called divine war carts, acted as spearheads to break enemy lines. Each carried 3 men, a driver, an archer, and a warrior armed with an axe or spear. When the drums roared, hundreds of chariots charged forward, wheels crushing the earth, dust billowing, and the cries of horses drowning the wind. The infantry followed, arranged in vertical and horizontal ranks, tasked with guarding the flanks, finishing off survivors, and securing terrain. In narrow valleys where chariots could not maneuver, the Shang switched flexibly to a surrounding formation shaped like the character Wei, attacking from 3 sides and driving the enemy into a death trap. Terrain was vital. The Shang always chose flat ground near water, where chariots could reach full speed and striking power. In mountainous areas, they built wooden bridges and temporary roads for the chariots, proof of the impressive engineering of the Bronze Age. Every stone and rope was used as an extension of the Shang king's power. Weapons and technology. The ringing of bronze amid fire and smoke. The Shang's bronze smelting technology reached its peak, forming the backbone of warfare. Archaeological finds from Yinshu reveal finely crafted battle axes, yua, halberds, gua, bronze spears, and plated chest armor. The axe blades were heavy and razor-sharp, mounted on long wooden shafts, delivering devastating blows. They were not just weapons, but emblems of authority. Generals carried axes engraved with divine beasts, symbols of both command and execution. Bronze spears had 3-edged tips capable of piercing hide armor. Archers used horn bows with bronze-tipped arrows that could fly hundreds of paces. As chariots advanced, lines of archers behind them shot continuously, raining bronze-tipped death upon enemy ranks, a tactic historians liken to ancient artillery. From the clanging of hammers in the foundries to the booming of drums on the battlefield ran a continuous rhythm, the sound of organization and discipline. The Shang believed deities dwelled within metal, so each weapon was consecrated through blood sacrifice. Forging arms was not mere production, but a sacred awakening, giving each axe and spear a will of its own, embodiments of faith and the might of the nation. The battlefield and the enemy, where blood mixed with earth. The Shang Wars spanned across the valleys of the Yellow and Qing rivers and the northern plains of China, harsh lands of summer floods and winter winds that cut the skin. Their enemies were dozens of tribes such as the Qiang, Tufang, Yifang, and Renfang, each with its own customs, warfare, and gods. When the two forces clashed, the battlefield became a whirlwind of metal. Drums and horn calls echoed. Shang chariots charged through clouds of dust, wheels crushing horse carcasses, spears striking the ground, blood spraying and mingling with drizzle. An oracle bone inscription recorded, attacked the Qiang, won a great victory, killed 9,000 captives, captured 13 generals, heaven granted auspicious signs. Though the numbers may be exaggerated, they reveal the immense scale of warfare in that era. With superior technology and organization, the Shang held near-total military dominance across the Central Plains. #mobilization, the Army of Heaven's mandate. According to spice.fsi.stanford.edu, in major campaigns, the Shang could mobilize from 10,000 to 13,000 soldiers, not counting the thousands of laborers and slaves providing logistics. Recruitment relied on obligations from vassal states and royal decrees. Each region had to supply men, horses, and provisions when omens of war appeared. On the eve of departure, a national-level ritual was held at the central altar. Bronze drums thundered, incense smoke curled around blades, and all soldiers shouted in unison, "Long live the Son of Heaven." This mobilization showed that the Shang army was not just a fighting force, but a microcosm of the nation itself. When soldiers marched to war, they carried the souls of their ancestors and faith in their king's divine right. Thus, war in Shang culture bore two meanings: to defend and expand the realm, and to fulfill heaven's will, waging war on behalf of the divine. From glory to the beginning of decline. Yet that same power was a double-edged sword. As the court fractured with internal strife and suspicion, as seen in the previous passage, the once mighty military machine began to lose its soul. Generals distrusted one another, vassals no longer sent their full troops, weapons went unmaintained. The war chariots that once thundered now gathered dust in storage, the bronze furnaces dimmed. The army was still large, but unity was gone. When royal commands were issued, many soldiers marched more from duty than from faith. Thus, the strategy that had once unified the Shang became a relic of the past. A new enemy, the Zhou, was rising in the west, with a younger, more disciplined army bound by loyalty. The difference was not in numbers or weapons, but in spirit. The Shang had technology, bronze, and chariots, but the Zhou had the hearts of men. And in the coming confrontation, heaven's mandate would once again shift. As night fell over Yinshu, fires flickered in the foundries. The sound of hammers on metal still echoed, but it had grown dull, weary. An old craftsman murmured to his companion, "The bronze still shines, but the hearts of men have grown cold." Those words resounded like a prophecy, foretelling the final fateful battle of the Shang Dynasty, when material might would no longer be enough to preserve an empire rotting from within. The wind from the west blew in, carrying the scent of dry earth and drifting sand. Upon the walls of Yinshu, the banners of Shang still fluttered, though their once bright red had faded to brown. The drums of war no longer thundered as in the days of Wu Ding. Only the uneven beats of ritual drums echoed through desperate prayers. The Shang Dynasty, once the empire that unified the Central Plains and made tribes tremble, now stood upon the brink of ruin, exhausted in both body and spirit. Beyond its borders, the vassal states rose in rebellion. Regions once loyal gradually severed ties, ceased paying tribute, and ignored imperial summons. Old tribes such as the Tufang and Qiang regained strength. In the west, the Zhou clan grew quietly powerful, building a new system of governance, firm yet flexible. They learned from Shang how to organize armies, but instead of basing command on bloodlines, they built it on merit and loyalty. That difference became a blade aimed at the heart of an aging empire. Meanwhile, the population declined, agriculture faltered, and disasters struck again and again. Floods along the Yellow River swept away farmlands. Years of war had drained the youth. The fields lay barren, grain scarce. In Yinshu, the royal granaries were empty, yet the palaces still held lavish feasts. The people starved, while courtiers continued to sacrifice hundreds of prisoners and animals to the gods, a grotesque reflection of power lost in delusion and blindness. Amid this decay, the throne fell to King Zhou, Dixin, the last ruler of Shang, described in Wikipedia and ancient works such as Sima Qian's Records of the Grand Historian as the most depraved and cruel of the ancient sons of heaven. Dixin was once intelligent, eloquent, and bold, but proud, intoxicated by power. In his early reign, he reformed the army and adjusted taxes, briefly reviving the court. Yet within a few years, arrogance and desire consumed his wisdom. He built the Palace of Deer Terrace, creating lakes of wine and forests of meat, feasting through endless nights with musicians and beauties. Legend tells of Daji, the peerless woman of the Ji tribe, at his side. Perhaps a myth, yet a mirror of the dynasty's final decadence, where prayers to heaven had become hollow echoes among drunken revels. As the court's morality collapsed, so too did the faith of its people. The king turned to brutal punishments, roasting by fire, dismemberment, executions as offerings, to silence dissent. After each defeat, he blamed his generals, sacrificing innocents to wash away guilt before heaven. Even in the final oracle bone inscriptions, one reads words of despair. Does heaven still bless Shang? If enough blood is offered, will the earth be at peace? That question repeated itself endlessly, revealing that both ruler and people felt the shadow of fate descending, yet none had the wisdom to find escape. Within the army, the will to fight disintegrated. The chariot forces that once thundered across battlefields were now rusting relics. The ranks were divided. Most soldiers were peasants forced into service, stripped of loyalty. Noble units grew arrogant, guarding only their own privilege. Orders came late, generals feuded. As Zhou rose, many of Shang's own vassals secretly defected. Later historians would call it the war half lost before it began. For Shang's defeat started the moment it lost the hearts of its people. Economically, the once brilliant bronze and agrarian system withered. After generations of mining, the copper veins of the Central Plains ran dry. Weapon and ritual production dwindled. Endless warfare broke the transport lines. Grain failed to reach the capital. The outer provinces starved while taxed heavily to fund the luxury of the court. The widening gulf bred quiet hatred spreading like fire beneath ash. Politically, the dynasty lost what once made it great, its sacred order and divine ritual. Ceremonies once solemn became hollow spectacles. The king was no longer seen as heaven's bridge to mankind, but a mortal drunk on wine and blood. Diviners and priests once revered were now bribed or slain. The oracle bones, the soul of Shang, fell silent. No one asked heaven anything anymore. It was the sign that the spirit of the dynasty had departed its body. As the court unraveled, a new enemy appeared, the Zhou. Under the leadership of King Wen and later King Wu, they were not only strong in arms, but claimed the new mandate of heaven. They declared, "Shang has lost virtue. Heaven grants its command to Zhou." Those words cut the sacred thread that had bound Shang's people for centuries. One by one, its vassals turned. The western and southern borders fell with barely a response from a paralyzed court. Even then, Yinshu still glittered under lamplight, but it was the light of a candle before the storm. In the rear palace, Dixin drank among his musicians and courtesans. Outside the walls, hungry soldiers huddled by dying embers, armor torn, eyes dulled by frost. Two worlds coexisted, one of illusory power and one of crumbling reality. One night, in the Deer Terrace Palace, Dixin summoned a diviner and asked, "If Zhou comes, will Shang prevail?" A crack ran diagonally across the turtle shell, an omen of absolute doom, but none dared speak. The diviner bowed, trembling. Heaven has not answered. By dawn, Zhou's banners rose upon the western horizon. The Shang army was hastily assembled. Generals had no time to meet. Old chariots rolled from storage, horses thin, wheels broken. Dixin still donned his armor, but his gaze was hollow. He did not yet know that the Battle of Muye, the final conflict sealing 6 centuries of glory, was near. And when the first war drums of Zhou sounded in the distance, dust and smoke surged like waves from the west. Yinshu trembled. Bronze statues toppled, temples cracked. In the gusting wind, the last banners of Shang struggled to fly. A desperate dance of a dynasty drained of life, besieged from without, decaying from within. An empire built on blood and faith had reached its end, not because its enemies were stronger, but because it had forgotten why it existed at all. Winter dawn, 1046 BC. The red sun rose over the western horizon, where cold winds from the highlands carried dust and the scent of rusted iron. On the plains of Muye, a flat expanse near the capital of Yinshu, 2 great armies prepared for the confrontation that would decide the fate of ancient China. To the east stood the Shang army under King Zhou, Dixin, about 170,000 men according to historical records, including tens of thousands of captives and conscripted peasants. To the west stood the Zhou forces, commanded by King Wu Jifa, numbering about 50,000 elite soldiers, well-trained and burning with faith that they embodied a new mandate of heaven. The two sides, one a decaying empire, the other a rising power, faced each other in a silence as heavy as history's final breath. Before marching, King Wu performed a sacrifice to heaven atop his command chariot. Drawing his sword toward the east, he declared through the mist, "Heaven has abandoned Shang. The mandate belongs to Zhou." The words thundered through the ranks like a storm. The Zhou army roared in unison, "Punish Shang!" their cry rolling outward like waves. In the Shang camp, Dixin ascended the high tower of the Deer Terrace, clad in heavy bronze armor, his eyes dark and hollow. Below him, soldiers stood scattered, many with heads bowed, some whispering, "Heaven no longer stands with us." When the first war drum sounded, the Zhou chariots advanced onto the plains of Muye. Wheels ground against the earth, horses neighed in echoing waves. Behind them, Zhou infantry formed a wedge-shaped formation, the Jiyu battle array, designed to pierce the Shang's vast but chaotic ranks. King Wu, clad in black armor with a gleaming sword, shouted, "Attack!" A storm of bronze arrows shot into the sky, falling like rain made of metal. The Shang forces responded sluggishly. Their aging generals had lost clarity of command. Orders from the Deer Terrace traveled slower than the wind. The Shang chariots rolled forth, but wheels cracked, horses weakened, soldiers untrained. They charged in confusion, no formation, no signal. From afar, King Wu commanded a counterstrike by his elite chariot corps, each vehicle bearing 3 men, advancing in an arc. The 2 lines collided, metal clashing against metal, dust rising like a mist of blood. As the sun climbed high, the battle reached its climax. The drums of both armies thundered, one side fierce and rhythmic, the other faltering. The Shang troops, numerous but exhausted, began to break. Conscripted peasants threw down their weapons and fled. Several vassal lords, long resentful of the Shang court, defected mid-battle, raising Zhou banners and shouting, "Down with the tyrant king." According to records, within one watch of the day, tens of thousands of Shang soldiers deserted or surrendered, collapsing the defense lines like wooden walls consumed by fire. Amid the chaos, Dixin still grasped his sword, shouting orders to stand firm. "Whoever flees, cut them down," he cried, but no one obeyed. Zhou arrows rained near his command throne. Guards scattered, generals fell. His last bodyguards fought desperately as they retreated, surrounded by smoke, blood, and screams. Overhead, black crows began to circle. By afternoon, Zhou banners covered the fields of Muye. The Shang army was shattered. King Wu led his troops straight into Yinshu. None could resist. The city's people opened its gates to welcome the heavenly army. In the palace, Dixin removed his armor, donned white silk, and ascended the Deer Terrace one final time. Gazing westward at the setting sun glowing red as blood, he understood that heaven's mandate had changed hands. Chronicles tell that he set himself and his palace aflame, letting the fire devour the splendor of his dynasty. From afar, the column of smoke rose straight into the sky, the pillar of both ending and rebirth. The Zhou victory was not merely the outcome of a battle, but the inevitable conclusion of 6 centuries of turmoil. King Wu did not revel in vengeance. He ordered the burial of soldiers from both sides, offered sacrifices to heaven, and interred the Shang king with full honors. He proclaimed before the assembled lords, "Shang has lost virtue. Zhou receives the mandate. Henceforth under heaven there shall be no tyrant, only he whom heaven chooses." Thus was born the doctrine of the mandate of heaven, the belief that the right to rule derived not from eternal bloodline, but from moral virtue and the people's will. This became the ideological cornerstone of Chinese politics for the next 3,000 years. After the Battle of Muye, the remaining Shang fortresses one by one surrendered. The royal lineage was preserved through a single surviving branch, the ancestral Shang clan, granted the land of Song by the Zhou to continue ancestor worship, a reminder that history never wholly erases the past. Yinshu became ashes, yet within its soil future generations uncovered oracle bones, bronze weapons, and the remnants of a brilliant civilization. When night fell over Muye, the battlefield lay silent. The scent of smoke and blood lingered on the grass. Cold winds rustled through broken banners. King Wu looked eastward toward the burning horizon of Yinshu and sighed. "Does heaven hear the cries of men?" That question was a farewell to an entire age, an age of gods, bronze, and bone, when humanity believed war to be heaven's will. Yet it was through that very struggle that humankind learned civilization's first lesson. Heaven's mandate is not in the sky, but in the hearts of the people. The Battle of Muye was not merely the tragic finale of the Shang Dynasty. It was the overture to recorded Chinese history itself, an age of moral order and governance. In the ashes of Yinshu, the final drumbeat of Shang still echoes, not as the sound of defeat, but as a requiem bidding farewell to a civilization stepping into a new dawn. When the ashes of Yinshu cooled, those who later dug into the earth found things that time could not destroy. Fragments of bones engraved with characters, massive bronze tripods, and traces of rituals that once shook the heavens and the earth. Though the Shang Dynasty had fallen, its spirit lived on in every cultural symbol. Relics that told not only of war and power, but also of faith, intellect, and the sacred obsessions of early humanity. Oracle Bone Script. The first voice of history. In the yellow soil of Anyang, more than 150,000 pieces of oracle bones were unearthed, covered with winding ancient inscriptions. According to research from spice.fsi.stanford.edu, these are the earliest and most authentic historical records of China. Each character, carved by a bronze knife onto turtle shells or ox bones, is the direct voice of a dynasty that truly existed, not a legend. The inscriptions speak of simple yet grand matters. The king asking whether it would rain, whether the ancestors approved of a campaign, whether the army would win or lose, whether the harvest would be good. One oracle reads, "On the day Jiazi, divination, if we attack the Qiang tribe, will heaven consent?" The deep, rough yet powerful strokes reveal humankind's early awareness of recording and foreseeing the future. From these symbols, Chinese characters later emerged, evolving and simplifying, yet still rooted in the Shang legacy. One could say the Shang laid the first cornerstone of East Asian written civilization. The oracle bone script was not only a language, but also a mirror reflecting the soul of its age. In every inscription, we see an organized society, with government, army, and spiritual fear. The Shang did not write to be remembered, they wrote to seek answers from heaven. That yearning itself made them immortal in history. Bronze art, power forged in fire. If writing was the intellect of the Shang, bronze was their heart and soul. The colossal tripods, wine vessels, bells, and battle axes discovered at Yinshu, Suzhou, and Henan have astonished modern archaeologists. According to ancientwarhistory.com, the Shang reached a level of bronze casting that the rest of the world would not match for nearly 1,000 years. Their piece mold casting technique was a revolutionary invention. Instead of pouring metal into a hollow mold, they crafted multiple tightly fitted clay sections, allowing for extremely intricate designs. The divine beast motifs, called Tao Ti, appeared everywhere. Open-mouthed creatures with round eyes and curved horns, half fierce, half sacred. Many scholars believe they symbolized ancestral spirits and royal power, embodying the concept of unity between man, God, and object. Bronze tripods, ding, over 1 meter tall and weighing hundreds of kilograms, were used in national rituals. During sacrifices to heaven, the Shang king would line up dozens of tripods. Fires blazed, the scent of wine and meat offerings mingled with incense smoke. The sounds of bronze bells, drums, and chants resounded through the halls, a symphony of metal and faith. These artifacts were not only artistic treasures, but instruments of authority. Each tripod was inscribed with the king's name, reign year, and ritual purpose, a bronze document recording history. Through them, later generations learned that Shang power lay not only in its army, but also in its ability to transform metal into sacred symbols. Sacrificial rituals, when religion and politics became one. According to History.com, the Shang Dynasty placed religion at the core of political authority. Sacrificial ceremonies to gods and ancestors occurred frequently on a grand scale, sometimes involving hundreds of animals, even humans. The sacrificial pits found at Yinshu contained hundreds of skeletons, warriors, captives, and slaves, buried with weapons and offerings. In Shang belief, the worlds of humans and gods were deeply intertwined. The king served as the bridge between them. Whenever disasters, famine, or wars arose, he believed the ancestors were angry and needed appeasement through blood and gifts. Though such rituals seem gruesome today, they reflected a profound conviction in cosmic order and the ruler's sacred duty. Religion in Shang politics was not superstition, but a theocratic system. By controlling rituals, the king controlled belief itself. This mechanism helped the dynasty endure for nearly 600 years, longer than most of its contemporaries. Center and periphery, the model of a core civilization. According to ancientwarhistory.com, the Shang were not merely a dynasty, but China's first central civilization. They regarded themselves as people of the center, surrounded by barbarians, tribes yet to be enlightened. From this worldview emerged the idea of Zhongguo, the Middle Kingdom. Yinshu was the heart of this world, home to temples, palaces, bronze foundries, and oracle bone archives, while around it lay vassal states and dependent territories. The bond between center and periphery was not only forged through war, but through cultural and ritual exchange. Subordinate tribes learned to worship heaven, to carve oracle script, and to cast bronze. In doing so, Shang influence spread, not merely by sword, but by belief and knowledge. This model of central civilization became the ideological core of Chinese culture, preserved through the Zhou, Han, and thousands of years thereafter. A legacy beyond time. From Shang to Zhou, Han, and beyond. Though the Shang perished, their legacy flowed through the veins of Chinese history. The succeeding Zhou dynasty inherited nearly all of their ritual systems, hierarchies, and the belief in the mandate of heaven, merely changing its bearer. Concepts such as the Son of Heaven, state sacrifices, heavenly omens, and national ceremonies all originated in this age. By the Han Dynasty, Shang bronze artistry and ritual philosophy remained classical ideals. Confucian thinkers like Confucius often spoke of the yin rites, the ceremonies of the Shang, as symbols of moral governance. Culturally, oracle bone script became the foundation of Chinese writing transmitted through Zhou Qin and Han dynasties, still alive today in every brushstroke. Shang bronzes became emblems of authority, replicated in every later dynasty, each new emperor casting tripods to inherit heaven's mandate. The ancestral sacrifices in altered forms still persist in East Asian culture to this very day. More than 3,000 years have passed, yet when one stands amid the ruins of Yinshu, hearing the wind whisper through the sacrificial pits, watching the glimmering bronze patterns under museum lights, it feels as though the Shang have never truly left this world. In each carved bone fragment, we see both fear and faith. In each bronze tripod, we see humanity's yearning to reach the divine, and in every ritual, we hear the heartbeat of a people striving to define themselves. That is the greatest legacy the Shang left behind, not mere material splendor, but an eternal question. Can humankind truly grasp heaven's mandate, or do we merely walk in its shadow? A question that, after millennia, still makes posterity bow in silence, before the engraved bones, the heavy tripods, and the distant echoes of an immortal civilization. Across the land of Yinshu, where the wind still sweeps over broken bricks, and where bone fragments carved with ancient symbols lie motionless beneath the earth, history seems still to breathe. Every grain of dust here was once blood, every stone a foundation of a palace, every carved line the words of people who once lived, believed, and died in the name of the mandate of heaven. Looking back on more than 6 centuries of the Shang Dynasty, one can see the full cycle of power, born in blood, blazing in the fire of bronze, decaying in suspicion, and immortalized in human culture. 1. From origin to zenith, the cycle of ancient power. The Shang began with Cheng Tang, who overthrew the tyrant Xiajie by believing that heaven grants its mandate to the virtuous. The dynasty reached its height under Wu Ding, the wise ruler who elevated the empire to supremacy in warfare, culture, and governance. Yet, as with all empires, glory turned into burden. When power ceased to follow morality and was driven instead by greed, everything built on faith began to crumble under its own weight. From the Battle of Mingtiao to the Battle of Muye, history closed like a perfect circle. A new dynasty rising to overthrow the old. With the same proclamation, heaven has changed its mandate. 2. The lesson of power and morality. When virtue is lost, fate is lost. From Encyclopedia Britannica to modern scholarship, all agree. The Shang did not fall because of military weakness, but because of moral decay. In its early years, kings ruled with benevolence and reverence for ritual, and the dynasty prospered. But when the last king, Zhou, Dixin, turned rituals into instruments of cruelty and faith into a luxury of indulgence, the trust of the people collapsed. Power, stripped of ethics, becomes a shackle for its wielder. Shang taught the generations to come a bitter lesson. A civilization can perish not by swords and spears, but by the corruption of its rulers' souls. 3. The military lesson, when strength loses its spirit. None doubted the might of the Shang army. They possessed war chariots, bronze weaponry, and tactics far beyond their age. Yet, in the Battle of Muye, that vast host crumbled before an enemy 3 times smaller. Why? Because they no longer believed in their own righteousness. When soldiers fight for a tyrant's command instead of conviction, no weapon can save them. Shang reminds us that an army unbound by loyalty and purpose is nothing but an armored mob. That truth remains timeless. Victory belongs not to the strongest, but to those who know why they fight. 4. The cultural lesson. Civilization is built on faith, not technology alone. The Shang left behind great achievements in metallurgy, writing, architecture, and administration. Yet it was faith and ritual that made them a civilization. Every act, from war to harvest, was tied to heaven, to ancestors, to the belief that humanity was part of a sacred cosmic chain. Their rituals, though sometimes harsh, reflected a deep yearning for meaning. This is their eternal value, Technology may grow obsolete, but belief and social order, the ties that bind humanity, are what make a civilization endure. Viewed through a modern lens, Shang reveals a human paradox. Civilization does not always mean compassion, yet the journey through its darkness paved the way for the light of the Zhou and later dynasties. Through their errors, humanity learned that power requires restraint, and faith must be guided by wisdom. 5. A living legacy, Yinshu and the echo of memory. Today at Yinshu, the archaeological site recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site, people still unearth bones carved with characters, bronze cauldrons weighing hundreds of kilograms, and the remnants of ancient walls and halls. According to Britannica, it is among Asia's most important archaeological discoveries, proving the transition from myth to verifiable history. When the museum lights strike the displayed oracle bones, visitors can read the same questions once carved by Shang kings. Will it rain tomorrow? Will heaven favor the campaign against the Qiang? Questions so human, so real, they still seem to echo beneath the earth. Archaeologists and travelers stand in silence before the massive bronze vessels, their beast-faced motifs and faded inscriptions gleaming faintly. Each carving tells a story, each dent a memory. In the dim golden light of the museum, one can almost imagine the rising smoke of sacrifice, the thunder of drums, and the blare of bronze horns from 3 millennia ago. The dynasty is gone, yet its spirit lives on, through the relics and through how humanity continues to study, honor, and learn from it. 6. From Shang to the modern soul, memory not just to remember. In the age of artificial intelligence and space exploration, the legacy of Shang reminds us that power without morality breeds only ruin. Technology, however dazzling, can never replace faith or humanity. To look back at Shang is to gaze into a mirror, where power, knowledge, and belief meet, sometimes to illuminate, sometimes to consume. If we fail to learn from the past, we will repeat its spiral, rising, collapsing, turning to ashes once again. 7. The bell of history, closed, yet never silent. 3,000 years have passed, yet the echoes of Shang still resound. In the incense smoke of Yinshu, among fallen walls and cracked tiles, one can still hear the distant drums, the neighing horses, the haunting call of bronze horns mingling with the wind. It is not mourning, but the whisper of time itself. All glory must fade, only memory endures. And that is the greatest meaning Shang left to posterity, a lesson on the limits of power, the immortality of culture, and the undying human yearning to reach for eternity. Thus, from splendor to remembrance, the Shang Dynasty did more than close a chapter of history. It opened a journey of thought, one that every generation continues to write anew, with its own beliefs, mistakes, and hopes.